welcome to the final away edition of Mean Green Game Day as UNT, fresh off of a huge homecoming victory over UTEP 20-17 Saturday, and now that is the third game in a row UNT has won since the first time that they had 5 straight in 2018. Now, here to break it all down with me today is Rachel Sanders, Connor Hibbett, and Mark Barrera, guys. I mean, there's a lot to break down. There was a lot of discouragement heading into this game that UNT probably couldn't live up to the expectations that UTEP provides, and yet UNT proved us all wrong, basically, even though we had UNT winning this game in predictions. But there's a lot of positivity to go around. Rachel, let's start with you. What do you see Saturday?
Positivity. There's lots of it. I'd say the defense definitely is their number one. Defense had 3 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, and 8 quarterback hurries as a whole. They worked as a great unit. You're seeing them come together, so it's a good thing to see that.
I really like the turnaround that UNT has had this season with the offensive game plan. At first, it felt like things were kind of off the rails. We were trying to run a hurry-up offense, and UNT was not successful at that at all. I mean, they were in third and long situations to where they would have to be obvious passing situations, and it would put us in difficult positions. But over these last few weeks during this 3-game winning streak, what UNT has done differently is they played more in a phone booth, and what they're relying on is their offensive line getting 4 and 5 yards per carry, setting us up for manageable 4th down situations. And that's why we've seen high success rates on 4th down here recently. And I credit that to the coaching staff. It's been a complete turnaround. I mean, when you go 1-6, you can throw everything away and you can totally lose all momentum and you can say, well, this is a lost season. But what UNT has done, totally changed the mentality of this team. And they've had a complete turnaround, look like a completely different team. And they did that against UTEP. They controlled the line of scrimmage, like Rachel said, defensively and offensively. We're able to stay in those situations to keep our defense off the field and make UTEP kind of have to gamble on defense. And that's what allowed us to have some big passing plays as well.
Mark, talking to some of the players earlier this week, this didn't come as a shock to them as far as Austinani. He mentioned that we should have had games like this all season. We were just on the brink of doing so, and so finally having those little things come together, especially penalties. UNT committed only 2 penalties, which is the season's best. So having these little pieces start to go UNT's way, the momentum is starting to climb, and I'm sure they're still on cloud 9 after Saturday.
Oh, for sure. And, you know, you mentioned Austinani. Austinani had a no-turnover game again. So it's becoming a trend now. Austinani has no turnovers. UNT ends up winning. And Austinani, I know we've given him a lot of criticism all the season. He played very well against UTEP. He threw for 240 yards, had a touchdown, ran for 44, and ran for a touchdown. And we have to talk about the very end of the game. Rolling left to his right, chunking the ball deep to Travion Brown, his 5th reception all season, put us in position to score and win the game. That was a very big-time throw from
How does UTEP allow a guy to get behind them in that scenario? It's like the one thing you do is just keep everything in front of you. There's going to be about 10, 15 seconds left anyways, and they're going to have to punt. So, I mean,
and it isn't ironic that we complained about UNT's defense and their secondary and giving up those big plays, especially late in the game, and yet that's how UNT pulls off the epic upset, is beating the secondary.
What happened, especially through the second and third quarter, was UNT started to control the line of scrimmage, so UTEP had to bring more guys into the box, which leaves guys on islands in the secondary. That's why UNT was able to generate some big plays. And even when they didn't complete passes, there were a couple of pass interferences called on UTEP, which extended drives for UNT. So I think it was a really good game plan. And what UTEP has done to teams, which is let them make the mistakes and capitalize. That's what we did to UTEP. So we gave them a taste of their own medicine.
And Rachel, even though we had a great passing attack this game, let's not forget about the rushing. UNT with 183 rush yards and just under 4 yards a carry. And when you're running basically 4 yards a carry, that generates a ton of success. You run 3 plays, you got a first down. So having the nice blend between the passing and throwing, that was really on full display.
I mean, you're finally seeing this team offensively on both sides doing well. Rushing, they got 183. Passing, they got 244. And this is a lot because of Ani. Ani this year in the last 7 games has had 44 yards rushing at least in the last 7 of those games. And it's been really helpful to see that rushing because that adds another person they have to watch out for. You have Torrey already, you have Johnson, you have Adei. You have to watch these players, and that's one thing that opens up those opportunities in the passing lane. So I think that just attributes to the offense being more balanced.
And Connor, first downs 22-14. I mean, talk about offense. And you can kind of look at the offensive stats, and you have Gavin Hardison going for 273 passing yards. And, you know, you say that your weakness on the team would be the defense, especially the secondary, but this team allowed only 14 first downs compared to UNT's 22, and third down conversion, 5 of 16 for UTEP on third down, really shutting the door when it comes to third down situations. And they didn't go for it as much, but when they did, UTEP just that one time, UNT shut them down. So coming into those situations and closing that door was vital.
Yeah, and most of their third down conversions were in the later part of the game when UNT was kind of playing a little bit more of a prevent kind of style of defense. The only thing that I would say the biggest mistake UNT made in this game was early fourth quarter when we had a chance to kick the field goal, which we would have gone up by 13. I think it was a mistake going for it. I understand if you score a touchdown, you make the extra point, you're up by 3 possessions, being up by 17. That essentially puts the game away with how UTEP's offense was playing. But if you kick the field goal and settle for 3, not only do you not give UTEP a chance of momentum with that defensive stop, but you also go up by basically 2 touchdowns. And the way that game was going, it didn't feel like UTEP would come back and score 2 touchdowns.
And marked 7 penalties for UTEP compared to UNT's best of the year, and that's 2 penalties. But one thing I want to talk about is the time of possession. As Connor mentioned earlier, you know, UNT went for a little more hurry-up offense, which we haven't seen since the losing skid. And so now that we're starting to win, you see the formula for that, and you saw that UNT slowed the football down, decided to run a little more, chew up that clock, and not so much pace themselves a little faster than we've seen before. But this week they went back to that, escaped, but the time of possession, it was real close. I mean, UNT 30 minutes and UTEP 29. I mean, it's like right there. So does UNT try to go back to that hurry-up style of offense like we saw early on the season, or should they go back to their bread and butter, and that's slowing the football down?
We should slow the football down. We've talked about this all year, that we need to slow the football down. When we slow the football down, Austin Ane looks a lot more comfortable running the ball. When we slow the football down, teams can't score 30 points on us. When we slow down the football, we average 4 yards a pop when we run the ball. It's just a lot better for us in order to slow down the clock. It makes Austin Ane a better, quick, capable quarterback, and it gives our defense a rest on the opposite side.
And right now, the UNT defense, just within the past 2 games, average only allowing 305 yards. So we'll see if that can potentially be better this week with FIU, but at least stay around that realm of 305 and not any of these 400 or 500-yard passing games like we saw, or total yard games like we saw early on in the season. Now, one thing I want to talk about, Rachel, DeAndre Torrey, he is 2 yards away from his first career 1,000-yard season. Wouldn't it be a great triumph to do it here today?
It'd be amazing. There's a lot of things for Torrey going on, at least records-wise. He's had 311 rushing yards, and that's currently 10th, will be 10th possibly in UNT history. And then you also have to look, if he gets 3 more rushing yards, he'll be 10th as well. He's currently 16th on the list, though, overall. But there's a lot of things that are happening that are good for him. So I think he could potentially easily beat that 1,000-yard mark.
And Connor, one thing that we're talking about on first down is making sure that you put the opposition in those longer third down situations. What you need to do is have that tackle for a loss. And Deion Noville and KD Davis now rank in the UNT all-time top 10 when it comes to tackles for a loss. KD Davis at 9 and Deion Noville, that big nose tackle, at 5th. And so seeing those 2 players really come to life this year has been a joy to watch.
Oh, it certainly has. And I tell you, it's hard to find a true nose guard in college football these days, but Noville certainly fits that shame of it. So it's been really fun watching this UNT defensive line, and we've talked about these the last month of the season. They've been active, and yeah, maybe some of it's due to the teams that we're playing, and we're going to be playing another lackluster offensive line for Florida International this weekend. But it's certainly been fun. I'm a defensive guy, you know that about me, so I love watching this defense improve. And it also says a lot for the future with Phil Bennett, his first year here as a DC. He's completely changed things. I mean, we talked about last year how we were very porous stopping the run. Remember the bowl game against Appalachian State? It felt like they were getting 50-yard run after 50-yard run. Completely changed things. So I think this says a lot for the future of the program, too, because we're pretty young up front besides Noville.
Yeah, we'll see if those youngsters can continue to build together as we finish off the rest of this season. Big game today against FIU, looking for 4 straight before heading back home for a big UTSA matchup. But when we return, we're going to discuss some big names when it comes to the transfer portal. Who deserves to move, who wants to move, and who's going to stay? We'll break that down when we return. Welcome back to Mean Green Game Day. One thing that we've tend to see as of late is one player or coach go from a trial and error season to let's go to somewhere that I belong better. And that is Jason Bean, you have from UNT just last year, transfers to Kansas rather, and playing better football but gets more recognition. One thing that we're now going to discuss is going to be who deserves to move now from other teams. You have Spencer Rattler coming into the game last week for Caleb Williams, Caleb Williams replaced Spencer Rattler in the Texas OU game. So now we're starting to see a little bit of a trend here with multi-quarterbacks, as we as UNT know far too well. But we're starting to see that trend. So should Spencer Rattler be on the move next? Rachel.
I think he's easily on the move next, as much as I want to say this. But OU quarterbacks, when they transfer, they do really good. I mean, you have to look at Austin Kendall. He didn't do amazing in West Virginia, but he had a few good games. Mordecai is leading SMU to an 8-2 season, and Chandler Morris ended up getting his first start against TCU and winning against Baylor 2 weeks ago. So you have to look at that. And I think if he does move, Arizona State or UCLA are good options for him. He's going to be the automatic starter wherever he goes, and I think he's going to make a giant impact. He's done a great job at OU last year, only losing 2 games, but I think wherever he goes, he's going to do well.
Yeah, I have to agree with Rachel. I think he's going to end up in either Arizona or Arizona State. He's from Arizona. With the high school the high school he went to was Pinnacle High School, and that's only 5 minutes away from Arizona State. He had a blunder in Oklahoma when he wasn't playing good all this season. He was coming in as a favorite, as a Heisman favorite. Obviously didn't live up to that expectation. And the power is in the players now when it comes to transfer portals. They don't have the rule where they have to sit out a year anymore. So wherever he goes, he will make a major impact. I believe it'll be Arizona State other than Arizona.
So Connor, if Rattler was to go to, say, Arizona State or wherever that he goes, is he trying to prove himself not only as a good quarterback, but as a Heisman quarterback because the expectations were so high coming into this season?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. I think it's more with like his own expectation for himself, more so than I have to win the Heisman. But I'm sure that's going to be his expectation. I think any quarterback has the expectation of playing up to their best capability. And I think going into Arizona State potentially be interesting because I've heard some people bring up how he could transfer to Ole Miss, talking about Spencer Rattler. But look out for Miles Brennan. He is a former LSU quarterback. He entered the portal about a month ago. He entered his name at least into the portal. He was the number 4 pocket passer quarterback of the class of 2017. He had injuries 2 different seasons at LSU, so he never got a chance to shine. And also, the season that he would have been the starter in 2018, then you have Joe Burrow transfer from Ohio State. The rest is history. So he hasn't really had his chance to shine, but he's been great whenever he has played. He was leading the country in passing yards in 2020 before he went down in the 4th week of the season against Missouri. So whoever gets Miles Brennan, and I watch for him potentially go to Ole Miss. His older brother was a walk-on at Ole Miss, and Miles Brennan is from the state of Mississippi. So that's another. There's not a lot of big names in the portal right now, but that's one guy to kind of keep an eye on.
And one thing that we've talked a lot about just in recent weeks is the fact of head coaches potentially on the move or who should replace who. And one of them that comes to mind is going to be, Coach O. And you have LSU trying to potentially move a few things around. Now, I'm not saying he's going to move right now. He could. But that's one thing that we mentioned before. And so that's a perfect segue as we head into what coaches now should be on the move. And Rachel, I'll go ahead and toss it to you first. Some of the ones on the list here, I mean, you have obviously for UNT, you have Seth Luttrell, and you have contract negotiations there that could prevent that for the moment. But, what are some teams that could be potentially on the move next as far as head coach?
I think for head coaches, you have to look at LSU, USC, and Tech. Those are the 3 ones that I think come to mind at least. You have to look at these teams because they actually have a potential in the next few years. LSU, I think they go for Jimbo Fisher. I mean, you have to look at Scott Woodward. He ended up recruiting him, coming in a coach there. Or you have to look at Dave Aranda. In 2019, he was the defensive coordinator for an LSU national championship team. They already like him. He's already been there before, and he's already proven at Baylor that he's very good. So I think those are the 2 you have to look there. Tech, I think you look at Wake Forest as offensive coordinator. Warren Ruggiero, he's done very well. He's led Wake Forest to some really crazy offensive numbers. So those are the two. That's the one I would look there. And for USC, I'd look at Matt Campbell.
The LSU situation is very, very interesting. Scott Woodward is their athletic director. He was the athletic director at Texas A&M a few years ago. He was the guy who picked up Jimbo Fisher from Florida State. When Scott Woodward was at Washington a decade ago, he picked up Chris Peterson. He was the coach, Chris Peterson, who built up Boise State into the Boise State program that we know today. So wherever Scott Woodward has been, he's made a splash hire. But what's really interesting about the LSU situation, and anyone in the free agents and the agent world could tell you, the coaching situation around the country, it's all depending whether it's USC, Penn State, Cincinnati, you name it. It's all depending on what happens in Baton Rouge, because LSU is looked at as one of the top jobs, not just in college football, but in America for when it comes to the sport of football, NFL, you name it. So I think when you look at Scott Woodward, what he's been known to do in terms of making that splash hire, whatever happens in Baton Rouge is going to affect what happens nationwide. And that, again, includes USC. I think LSU is first, then I think it's USC second, and everybody else.
Now, obviously, Mark, we already have one big coaching change just a couple weeks ago in Gary Patterson and TCU. But what other coach in your mind is on the move?
I think Jimbo Fisher is one coach to be on the move. You know, he's had a history about this. When he was at Florida State, won a national championship, but then he moved all of a sudden to Texas A&M. I think it's going to happen the same way. I think Texas A&M, after he beat Alabama, very huge win for Texas A&M, I think actually he moves to LSU. If I had to guess, I believe he'd go to LSU. It'd be a really good deal for him. For USC, you know, a really big market team. I believe they pick up Kansas City Chiefs offense coordinator Eric Bieniemy. I think Eric Bieniemy, he's had his challenges in the NFL. He has coached Patrick Mahomes, so bring up a lot of USC quarterbacks. He has California, which is one of the best recruiting spots in the nation. So, and USC is just one of the best programs in the nation when they are successful, and they haven't been successful. But I think Eric Bieniemy would be the right man for that
Is
job.
college football better when USC is good?
I mean, what we've seen in the past, I'd say so. But it's funny just seeing all these pieces move around and what could be a very different looking 2022 season than what we're compared to seeing this year. And Rachel, let's go back to you. We talk about coaches and players who are on the move. Who is staying put in their position right now?
So a name that has been really heard around the nation with LSU is Lincoln Riley. I don't think that's happening. I think Lincoln Riley, with him being coached under Bob Stoops, he's going to stay. Mel Tucker just got himself a pretty big deal, so he's going to stay. Jeff Traylor, he was originally supposedly going to possibly leave UTSA, but UTSA just gave him a good deal a few weeks ago, so he's going to stay. Right now, there's a few coaches I'd be worried about. I don't think Sonny Dykes ends up staying at SMU. I think he goes to TCU and gets the bigger market. But out of the coaches that I'm hearing right now, those are the ones I think will stay.
We have heard some of the names getting brought up for the LSU job, whether it's been Jimbo Fisher, Lincoln Riley. Some have said Lane Kiffin. Some have said James Franklin. All these names are the big name, the splash hire. So that proves my point that Scott Woodward is going to make a great hire. I can't tell you who it's going to be, but I can tell you whenever the breaking news comes across your phone, LSU hires this coach. That coach is going to be a big name coach, and LSU is viewed as one of the best jobs in America. So it's an interesting situation. I don't really know who it's going to be. I think another guy to look for is Dave Aranda at Baylor right now. But if you're talking about guys who are staying put, I'll go with our own coach for Seth Luttrell. I mean, look at the turnaround that we've had. And I think Ren Baker understood the situation that we were coming into this season with the strength of schedule, kind of being loaded up front. Of the first 7 games, I should say 6 of the first 7 games, you played against teams who had a ranking or at least a vote to be in the AP top 25 to start the season, preseason top 25. So I think Baker and Seth Luttrell and the whole entire athletic department knew the situation that UNT was coming into. But at least we have proven to ourselves that we are capable of having a turnaround when you're not playing all these great teams. So it gives us a better future.
Mark, very briefly, who do you think would stay?
I have James Franklin from Penn State. I think he's been in the rumor mill very much. much, but I think he stays at Penn State. I think Jamie Chadwell stays at Coastal Carolina. He's been in some rumors with Virginia Tech, but he's built that Coastal Carolina program up from the bottom. They're very successful now. And interestingly, I have Luke Fickell staying at Cincinnati. I think he's the same as Jamie Chadwell. They're about to, I believe that they're about to be in the playoff race. I don't think he can leave after making the playoffs, so I have Luke Fickell staying as well.
Yeah, no doubt that those two are just too vital for those organizations to stay as competitive as they have shown this year. But we'll see how that will happen next year. But that's all it's just a prediction. But boy, I'll tell you what, these pieces could move around and be an interesting 2022 season. But when we return, we're going to dissect for the third time our top 10 predictions for the very end of the season. Has anything changed? I guess we'll see when we return. Top 10 in the nation when it comes to college football. That's been a tale that many have been trying to figure out here in just the last 2 weeks. And now we have a brand new poll, but for us, this is going to be our third time trying this out. And for me personally, wow, is there a lot to discuss here. By the way, I'm joined with Rachel Sanders, Connor Hibbett, and Mark Barrera to break this down. But for me personally, Georgia is going to stay number 1. I think that's an easy wrap for all of us. Number 2, I'm going to go with Ohio State. Ohio State is going to win out, take down Michigan State today, and beat Michigan at the Maze next week. And we'll see if that continues to go into the playoffs. But Ohio State, they're starting to play a little better football now than they did earlier in the season. C.J. Stroud starting to really start to take heed. But anyways, then we got Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati's a team that we've been thought about all season, and they're going to, right now they're sitting at the 5 seed because of an Oregon Duck loss later on today. Yes, I'm predicting an Oregon loss to Utah. Cincinnati will sneak in. Alabama, though, is the number 2 team, and that'll be the kicker because Alabama is going to face Georgia in the SEC championship game, my prediction, and Georgia's going to win that, but I think it's going to be close, and somehow, some way, Alabama will still retain as the 4 seed. And so that's how the top 4 is going to play out. Number 5, though, you got Oklahoma State. They're playing phenomenal football. 6, Michigan State. They're going to be about the exact same as they are now. 7, I think OU's going to sneak in. OU's going to try and win out the rest of the season here, or at least get close to it. I think they still sneak in at the top 10. I'm going to put them at 7. Number 8, let's see. Actually, no, sorry. 7, Notre Dame. 8, Oklahoma. 9, Ole Miss. Ole Miss, the team that we've been starting to think about past few weeks, coming all the way from the 20 spot, and now they're going to make their way into the top 10 at the tail end of the season at 9. And finally, 10, number 3, Oregon at the moment. Like I said before, they're going to lose to Utah today, in my opinion, at the Utes. But they're not going to fall out of the top 10. They're going to hit right at that last part. So, Rachel, who are your top 10?
My top 10. You obviously have to start with the number 1, Georgia. They win the SEC. There's no question in my mind about that. Number 2, I give this to Ohio State. Ohio State's going to win out. They're not going to look convincing, but they're going to have a tough road game today against Michigan State. Well, or tough home game, excuse me. And I think that game is going to make them at least not look as good. But I don't know if I think they end up winning. 3, I got Oregon. I think they might lose today against Utah, but I still think a 1-loss Pac-12 team gets it into the top 4. So I put them at 3. 4, I put Cincinnati. I really don't love this, but with what's happened the last few weeks, Cincinnati, I think, ultimately makes it. Cincinnati's going to win out. I don't think they've won games convincingly, but they've done what they needed to do. 5, I put Bama. They're 2 losses because they lost earlier to A&M. They're going to lose to Georgia, and I think it'll be pretty convincingly. So they will drop out of the top 4. I got 6 is Michigan State. I know they lost against Purdue, and I think they're going to lose today, but they're too good. 7, I have Notre Dame. Their only loss is to Cincinnati. They haven't played anyone. There's no conference title for them. 7. 8, I got Oklahoma. Oklahoma wins out. After losses, Oklahoma knows how to bounce back. They're going to bounce back, and they're going to win all 3 games, including their conference championship. 9, I got Michigan. They're going to lose to Ohio State. They're going to lose to Michigan State, but those are both 2 top 10 teams. They're good. And number 10, I have A&M. The committee always loves an underdog story. You got Calzada as your backup QB beating Alabama and Auburn at home. I give it to A&M at 10.
I think Georgia right now, if you want parity in college football, you want Georgia to win now, because if Bama were to beat Georgia in the SEC championship, then you're probably looking at all the regulars, the typical elites of college football to make the playoff. But for my top 10, I've got Georgia at number 1. They've been the best team in college football. I don't think I need to say anymore. Watch in the SEC championship. I know some people think Bama might beat them. I think the SEC championship is going to be vital in terms of the playoff, not just because of Alabama beating Georgia, but also how, if Georgia were to beat Bama, how they beat Bama. Number 2, I think I would have to go with Ohio State. The strength of schedule is going to give them a chance to be at number 2. And with how Ohio State's looked as of recent, they look like the second best team in America right now. Number 3, I'm going with Alabama. I think Georgia's going to beat Alabama in the SEC championship. But if you were to have the total chaos scenario right now, I think the Big 12 is out. I don't think, if the committee does not respect a one-loss Oklahoma, why are they going to respect a one-loss Oklahoma State? That's how I view that. And then Baylor lost to TCU, so now they're out of the playoff. They're not going to put a 2-loss Baylor team in. The only team in the country with 2 losses who can make the playoff would be Alabama. And I think if they lose to Georgia in a close game, which I think it will be, I think they're going to put them in at number 3, because they're not going to put Bama at number 4, because they can't have Georgia and Bama face off again right after playing for the SEC championship. Number 4, I have Cincinnati. I have this theory with like lone wolf teams. There's typically one team every single season that has a really good roster put together and a schedule that provides them a path to have a New Year's 6 appearance. But with last year, or this season being a super senior season, last year everyone getting all the respect last year, and if you returned everybody, you were going to start high in the polls this season. That's what's happened with Cincinnati. That's how I figure they can make the playoff this year due to their success last year, and bringing everybody back again. At number 5, I got to go with Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's playing tremendous defense right now, playing top. I think they're a top 5 defense in America at the moment. But how about this? Can you imagine if Oklahoma State actually had their normal, regular, really good offense, how good they would be? Because they never had that good of a defense. It's kind of vice versa this year. But that's the chaos of the 2021 season. But I don't think they'd make the playoff. At number 6, I got to go with Notre Dame. I don't think they're going to put them any higher than that because they don't plan a conference championship. Oregon at number 7. Because they plan a conference championship, and I think they will get there, but I think they're going to drop a game from this point forward. But if they win their conference championship, then I think they're going to move Oregon back up because they respect a conference champion. At number 8, I'm going to go with the Michigan Wolverines. I think they're going to lose to Ohio State, but I think that could be a close game. Definitely one of the better games of that rivalry the last decade. If Michigan were to lose in a close game, they would have 2 very good losses. One loss you should have won against Michigan State, and the other to Ohio State. They're going to respect that from Michigan. They look like one of the more complete teams in the country at the moment. Number 9, I'm going to go with Ole Miss. Zach, I agree with you. I think there is a chance for Ole Miss to kind of sneak up into that top 10. They've obviously proven themselves this season. They're kind of like the Florida last year, but the Ole Miss this season, having that tremendous roster. You had like that jackpot roster. You know you can get a lot out of, and that's what Lane Kiffin has this year. And then at number 10, I'm going to go with Michigan State. I think there's a situation where they could lose to Ohio State, obviously this weekend, but then also lose at Penn State or not lose at Penn State, but lose to Penn State at home. But the committee respects Penn State, so they would view that as a good loss. So even though Michigan State would have 3 losses, they would view those 3 losses as good losses on the road to Purdue, on the road to Ohio State, and then at home against Penn State. So that would be the highest 3-loss team. But I think there's a situation where Wisconsin could get into the top 10 as well.
I'm about to sound like Connor's parrot because I think our first 6 are the same. I have number 1, Georgia Bulldogs. They're the best team in college football. There's no doubt about that. They've given up less than 10 touchdowns all season. Defense is amazing. Offense can be shaky, but the defense helps them out tremendously. They're the best team in college football, so Georgia is number 1. Number 2, I have Ohio State. They have been playing like the second best team in college football. C.J. Stroud has had a Heisman candidate type season. They have a receiver. They have 2 receivers, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. Tremendous. And I think Ohio State wins out. They win the Big Ten championship. They win the Big Ten championship. They're the number 2 seed. Number 3, I have Alabama. Bryce Young is the current Heisman favorite right now. I believe that they play Georgia in the SEC championship, but they lose in a close one, the closest Georgia has had to play all year. And the committee loves Alabama, and they wouldn't make them play again for the second time in the playoffs. So they would wait to the championship, like Connor said. So I have Alabama at number 3. Number 4, I have been high on them all year. I have Cincinnati. Desmond Ridder has kind of regressed a little bit
from what he started off as. Cincinnati, though, is going to go undefeated. They're going to win the American Championship, and then they will sneak in at number 4. Number 5, I have Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, I believe, wins out. They win the Big 12 championship, but I don't think the committee respects them enough in order to put them in over Cincinnati, Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia. They are a very good defensive team, but I believe that they are in the outside looking in. Number 6, I have Notre Dame. I don't believe Notre Dame can beat any of these teams in the top 10, but Notre Dame is a name that the committee loves to have, so I think Notre Dame will be at number 6. Number 7, I have the Ole Miss Rebels. Matt Corral is also a Heisman candidate. He has been playing out of his mind this season with 2,774 yards, 17 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. They've had quality win over Arkansas. I think Ole Miss sneaks in at number 7. I think number 8 is the Michigan State Spartans. I think they lose to Ohio State, but I think they beat Penn State. They finished 10-2. They have the head-to-head win against Michigan, who I have at number 9 because of that loss. And the Michigan Wolverines, I believe that they beat Maryland, but they lose to Ohio State team. But I believe it'll be close. It'll be very close than what it has been these past couple of years. And I have the Oregon Ducks finishing at number 10 with a loss to Utah as well today, but I believe they redeemed that loss in the Pac-12 championship.
Now, we started getting a little too comfortable when it comes to Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, and Oklahoma being the top 4 for like what seems like the past decade. But is this something when it comes to potentially Cincinnati, Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama, does Cincinnati here start to become, a household name when it comes to this top 4? Do we see in years to come when it comes with Clemson, do they make a rise again?
Clemson's going to make a rise again. They've got it made in the ACC. This is just a season where you have all these teams we talked about this a couple months ago. We talked about how the usual suspects, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma, they always have to reload. And everybody else was bringing back everybody this season. So it doesn't mean that it's going to it doesn't mean their dynasties are dead. It just means their road to success is going to be a lot more treacherous than it is normally.
I don't think Cincinnati is going to be someone you see next year, though, in this top 4. Cincinnati this year has gone lucky with a lot of these teams that people were saying, Clemson, Oklahoma, going down and not looking like themselves. I think that this is not, I'm not going to say it's a fluke, but I'm not going to say it's a repeat.
So say Cincinnati goes undefeated this year, and they don't make the top 4. How do you go back to that game plan next year, and expect something different?
I think them going into the Big 12 helps out a lot because they get that Power 5 status that they've been desperately needing before because they are in the American. The committee doesn't respect them because they are in the group of 5. But I believe I have to disagree, Rachel. I believe they do. I believe the Cincinnati, if they keep Luke Fickell, then they will become a powerhouse name.
Well, we'll see what the Bearcats can do. They got to finish the season off strong, though. Got a tough matchup today against SMU. But when we return, we're going to dissect UNT football as they look ahead to FIU as they look for 4 straight. Stick around. UNT coming off of a crucial 20-17 victory in the final seconds against UTEP in the homecoming game Saturday. But now they're going to pack up and head out to Florida for their final home game of the season, take on FIU and the Panthers. FIU, wow, are they struggling right now? Their first win of the season was their first game of the season, and guess what? That was against Long Island Sharks, 48-10, where Max Bortenschlager went off that game. But one thing that the quarterback has seen, especially last week, is that you can go from the highest of highs in week 1, and boy, has he seen the lowest of lows. And right now, UNT riding a high at the moment, especially on the defensive side of things. They could really go after this FIU Panthers offensive line, which in the past few games, UNT has taken on some teams with a lesser offensive line or an offensive line who is struggling at the moment, and they could take advantage once again. So preview for this game, what are some key players to watch?
Key players to watch. You got Austin Ani for UNT. He's going to have to do at least a good enough game, both running at least 40-plus yards to at least give something and not make him predictable. We got to have some good passing. I could see Brown from our last game. He could be a good potential guy to see out there. You have the big 3 when it comes to rushing with Torrey, Adai and Josh Johnson, I could see those three making a big impact for at least UNT. And then you have that D-line. There's nothing you can't say bad about them, at least as of right now.
And Connor, coming into this game, I mean, you come off of a huge loss to Middle Tennessee, 50-10, and then you have 4 turnovers, 2 interceptions, and 2 fumbles. So how do you get back on the, the positivity, go back into the huddle here this week with Bortenschlager and coach these guys? But you're looking at the linemen, they're like, do your job.
Yeah.
And we'll do ours, but you need to do your job. Don't give the ball away. And so how do the Panthers have any sort of shot today against UNT, as odd as it sounds?
It's an interesting situation really with Florida International right now because Butch Davis, their head coach, is going to be stepping down here in the next, it's kind of up in the air. They don't really know when he's stepping down, but they do know for sure that he's not going to be returning next season. They have an interim athletic director at the current time right now. So I don't really know how the FIU players are going to react. Bortenschlager, like you said, he's kind of struggled here these last few games. In the last 4 games, he has thrown more interceptions than he has touchdowns. He went off against Charlotte back on October 8th. He threw for over 460 yards and 4 touchdowns in that game, but since then, it's been downhill. And I think a lot of it has to do with the inability to run the football for Florida International. They're currently in the bottom 20 in college football. They're averaging a paltry 3.5 yards per carry. You talked about it, Zach. Their offensive line has struggled, and UNT these last few weeks they've played against some subpar offensive lines, and I think this is another offensive line that UNT can take advantage of. And when you got a team that's trending up in the Mean Green, and then a team that's trending down in the Panthers for FIU, to me this seems like a very good situation for the Mean Green.
And Mark, FIU, as to your point, 67 yards rushing the football last week, while giving up 261. You're looking at DeAndre Torrey and this little trio of running backs that UNT possesses. Torrey, by the way, only needs 2 yards to hit that 1,000 yards. I think we can go ahead and make a take, and he's going to get that today. But these running backs, they could have a heyday today with this defensive line.
It's kind of funny. Our strengths are their weaknesses.
Right.
This plays perfectly for UNT. I actually have a bold take. I think 2 running backs go over 200 yards. DeAndre Torrey and Johnson go over 200 yards. Okay. And I think Austin Ani goes for at least over 85.
Wow.
UNT has utilized them a lot in the read option game. He's had 50 yards, 40 yards. He's had a rushing touchdown these past 2 games. So I believe UNT will have a field day running the ball. Maybe not passing, because they like to play in the phone booth, like how Connor says. I wish they hope they do, because if not, it's going to get a little scary against FIU. But I believe UNT's rushing attack will prevail.
But one thing that we've been talking about in recent weeks, Connor, is that UNT, they've been well known in their rushing attack, and rightfully so. But what we saw last week, we can pass the football as well. And so having a good mix of passing and rushing the football today will be vital. But does FIU make any changes? Do they go right at stopping the run first? Because what we've shown last week, 147 yards for Middle Tennessee and 2 touchdowns when it comes to passing football. They can allow the pass as well. Does Austin Ani, although potentially a good rushing day, I think you can still mix it up and throw on that pass.
Yeah, that's going to come down to the pre-snap reads. If they bring a safety into the box, you're going to try to throw it over the top. If they keep 2 safeties back, play at 2 men under, then they're going to try to run the football. And what UNT has done really well, we talked about it earlier in the show, what they've done well these last few weeks is that they are taking their time, running a slower tempo of offense, and it's allowing the players to get comfortable in their roles. So I think UNT, Mark said it, FIU's weaknesses are UNT's strengths. So I think it's going to be a field day for us running the football. But I think in the UTEP game, in that second half, UTEP started to load the box, especially in that 4th quarter. And I think that's when UNT can start hitting some big plays. But I wouldn't be surprised if, like you said, Zach, if FIU comes out with a game plan to stop that run, if UNT starts to attack them over the top and then makes FIU play a little bit less aggressive, which will open up the running game. But I think it's all predicated on the pre-snap read.
And Rachel, 4th down is something that UNT has been more than accustomed to going for, and in the most recent weeks been very successful in doing so. Last week, Middle Tennessee went for it on 4th down 4 times, converted every single time. So this is an opportunity for UNT to take advantage of that. And although because of the defensive line that that FIU possesses, we don't expect to see too many fourth downs. Hopefully, that this offense should be able to do it on second or third down. But if the occasion arises, I think UNT is more than capable of doing so. And I mean, and going back to just for a number side of things, FIU actually leads this series 5-3. But with as much controversy is going on in the coaching side of things inside that FIU locker room, how will that impact the Panthers today?
There is a lot to say. I mean, first thing you have to look at is Max. Max Bornschlager is going to probably have the single season record at FIU. He needs only 266 to do that. My worry for UNT is our defense of our secondary. Our secondary has been not very good this year. They've given up tons and tons and tons. So that's something they're going to easily take advantage of. And then you're losing your head coach, possibly. You're losing him at the end of the year. We're not sure exactly what is going to happen this year in this game, but they have nothing to lose is the mentality there. They're going to go for it. They're going to do the crazy things that are outlandish and most times never done. So yeah, I'm a little worried about that with UNT on their high horse, seeing those 3 wins. But I think they're going to do well enough in the secondary that we're not going to have to worry about that. So I think UNT is going to be able to take care of the ball and be able to take care of the game.
Mark, one thing that you were mentioning when it comes to the rushing side of things, you have two running backs going for 100 yards, and Ani could potentially almost do the same. But one running back that hasn't got as much, notice or sort of publicized as much, and should, because this kid is showing great things, is Ayo Adeyi. I mean, what in the world? He had 57 so far this year, just in 4 games. 57 carries, 301 yards. He's averaging just over 5 yards a touch with 4 touchdowns. I mean, this guy is no one to overlook when he comes in from the bench.
Oh, no. Shout out to Patrick Cobbs, our running back coach. He has done a phenomenal job with our running backs. It seems like every running back that we get, they're capable of being a starter for us. And Ayo was a walk-on coming in, and which is great for him. He's getting that. He's getting those touches. He's getting that. He didn't do a lot against UTEP, but I think the main thing is that if you can rotate these guys and give them 10 carries and they average 5-6 yards a pop, it keeps fresh legs, first of all, and it throws different looks at a defense. And with FIU's defense, their front 7 is very poor. Their lead tackler is Richard James, and he's a defensive back. He has 78 tackles. He leads the team. So I believe if they do try to stack the box and try to stop the run, it won't even work because our O-line is good. I think the game scheme that we have will be run perfectly, and our rushers are just too good.
Very briefly from each of you, 1 point, 1 key to the game.
Our O-line gave up 0 sacks last week. I think giving up 0 sacks this week was going to be the same.
Okay.
FIU can't run the ball, so that means they're going to try to attack us through the air, so don't give out the big passing plays.
Defensive line needs to get those sacks and quarterback hurries.
You're going away from your original, but but going back to Rachel's point, remember this: the away games win every quarter, score every quarter. That didn't happen last week. UNT was able to escape, but so far the away win streak, it's not something that we talk about as much, yet it's happening. So let's enjoy, hopefully, another UNT win as we head into today's game and potentially still bowl eligible if they win today and next week against UTSA. However, that will be its own monster to face. But FIU and the Panthers lead the series 5-3, but the UNT, off of a 3-game win streak, look to improve to 4 straight. When we return, we got some predictions for you. Got some big games around the nation, and we'll go through them after the break. Welcome back to Mean Green Game Day. We have some game predictions for you. I'm Zach Fox alongside Rachel Sanders, Connor Hibbett, and Mark Barrera. Although we don't have the best record when it comes to predicting, we have one more week to get it right. So are we ready? Let's do this. So first game up on the list today is going to be Baylor and Kansas State. Kansas State. Baylor coming off, obviously, the loss to OU. Or sorry, no, they just beat OU, rather, but the loss previous week to TCU. So they're able to bounce back and have 2 crowd rushes to do so. So you obviously have the excitement from the fans as well. But personally, I'm going to go with the Bears. I think the Bears pull it off at K-State later on today.
Give me an upset. I like Kansas State.
All right.
This year, every time a team has rushed the field, the next week they lose. Examples of this are Purdue after they rushed the field against Michigan State. Michigan State came back and Michigan State ended up. Michigan State has done the same. They ended up playing next week against Purdue. They lost. Iowa State, they did the same thing against Oklahoma State. They played West Virginia. They lost. Give me the upset. Give me Kansas State. They've done this every year with the Big 12. There's always that one team. I give it to Kansas State.
Alrighty.
To Rachel's point, you wonder how Baylor's going to be playing coming off that high, but they're still playing for a Big 12 championship.
Right.
I think the Bears find a way to win on the road. K-State, though, quietly, they won a few games in a row playing really good football.
Give me the Baylor Bears. I think they're better than Kansas State. That's what it comes down to. I think they're becoming a very solid team. I don't think they quite win the Big 12 championship, but I think that after that win against Oklahoma, they've risen to what they've needed to
And
be.
potentially see those two yet again in the Big 12 championship. We'll see. All right, next up on the list, Oregon and Utah. Obviously, earlier in this show, I made it pretty known. Oregon, I see them losing today at Utah. Rachel, who you got?
I don't trust Oregon. I got to go with Utah. It's a home game for them. They'll probably see each other again in the Pac-12 championship. I'm going to go Utah.
Quick shout out to Kyle Whittingham and the Utes. They're one of my favorite teams in college football. Kyle Whittingham builds his programs the proper way. They play football the way it was meant to be played. I'm going to go with the Utes and the minor upset. They're actually a 3-point favorite, but based on ranking, I'm going to go with the upset.
Okay.
I'm going with the Utes as well. I think they pull off the, quote-unquote upset against the Oregon Ducks. I think Oregon plays teams too closely, and I think Utah's going to take advantage of that today.
That's a good point that you bring up. A lot of teams have played some very close games, and sneaking out Cincinnati is one of them, Oklahoma's one of them, Oregon's one of them, and yet they're all competing in the top 10, going for that number 4 spot. So it's ironic. It's another discussion for another time, but what do those 4 teams need to do in order to get past that platform? But that's for another day. But next up, we have UAB taking on, boy, I tell you what, those Roadrunners are running quick. The UTSA Roadrunners, escaping a very close first half last week, and yet to Southern Miss, and yet pulled it off in the end. But UTSA at home takes on UAB. You got to go with the bigger dog here, UTSA.
I got to go with UTSA as well. They've done an incredible job this year. I'm hopeful that they actually win this game and blow them out so that UNT has a better chance next week. But hey, let's see a UTSA victory.
Quick shout out to Bill Clark and the Blazers. They always find themselves in the thick of the hunt for the Conference USA championship game. But I think UTSA takes them down this year. They play them at home. UAB is not as good of a road team. Coming off the win against Marshall, UAB is playing better football, but I think UTSA finds a way to win. And they were looking ahead to this game against Southern Miss last week. That's why it was close.
Give me UTSA too. Y'all have known I've been on high on UTSA all year. Sincere McCormick, Frank Harris, Zachary Franklin. They're a tremendous trio. I will say they will get UAB's best shot today. So it will be tomorrow. Sorry, I forgot today was Friday. I do think they'll get UAB's best shot.
Mark, you mentioned a point. UTSA has been your team, yet Cincinnati. I bet if UTSA and Cincinnati took on each other, man, you would just
okay, no.
The universe would explode.
The universe would explode. I would favor Cincinnati, but I like the way they play. I like the way UTSA plays. I've become a fan as I've watched them this year.
We'll see. Wake Forest up next, taking on Clemson. Wake Forest. Personally, I have them with that offense that we've mentioned for several weeks now. Wake Forest pulls it off against the Tigers.
It's Clemson. It's a home game. The last home game Clemson lost was in 2016 to Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh's going to ultimately win that championship. I don't think Wake Forest will be able to pull off the upset. In the on-road games, they haven't done very well. Give me Clemson. Deb Valley will be happy for this game.
I know Clemson hasn't been as good this season, but can we at least talk about how amazing their defense has still been? It's championship caliber. In my opinion, it's a top 3 defense in college football at the moment. Clemson can play defense. Wake Forest can't. Wake Forest usually falls apart in November. They usually break through at the beginning of the season. That's the way their schedules work. They don't have as much depth as Clemson does. I think Clemson kind of makes a name for themselves again at the end of the season going into next year. Give me Clemson in the upset.
It's funny that you mentioned that Wake Forest can't play defense, but Clemson can't play offense either. I think Wake Forest wins. I think if Wake Forest scores more than 24 points, they'll be able to squeak it out.
Wow. It's a low bar to set, and yet it's very possible.
Clemson has struggled to score all
Exactly.
season long.
Yeah.
So it should be a close
It will be close.
Low-scoring
Yes.
game, preferably because of that Clemson defense as well. But second to last year, we got SMU, the rivals of UNT, but they're doing very well, taking on a very good Cincinnati team who needs this win today. They need to win out to remain any sort of eligible for that top 4. Personally, Cincinnati and the Bearcats take care of it. SMU in that loss to Houston, that's going to hurt them. Cincinnati takes it.
I like SMU. I think Mordecai's done a very good job there. I don't think the SMU defense is going to be able to stop that Cincinnati offense, and that Cincinnati defense will get crucial stops when they need to. Give me Cincinnati in this game.
I think the Cincinnati defense is going to force a couple of key turnovers in this game. Mordecai, he's been airing it out. He's been doing very well this season, but he has a tendency to sometimes turn the ball over, and I think that's going to cost him on the road. I think Cincinnati wins.
Give me Cincinnati as well. I think playing at home gives them a bigger advantage than what they would have been playing in Dallas. So I think they're trying. Their mission is to make the playoff. So I believe Cincinnati will win.
Finally, one that we've prepped up all show for you. North Texas will take on FIU later on today. UNT, I think with that 3-game win streak, I mean, I predicted before that they would win the next 4, so this would be the last on that trip before hitting UTSA. I didn't make a prediction for UTSA, but I think UNT takes care of that FIU defense very handily. I have UNT by 20.
FIU is struggling coming into this game. They've got nothing to lose. I do think UNT pulls out the win. I think it's going to be a little closer than us UNT fans would like, but I like UNT in this game.
I was surprised to see the spread was only 9.5 when it first opened up. I took it as a virtual lock. I'll see if I end up making that mistake betting on the mean green, but I think UNT wins this game easily.
I think UNT wins as well. I think they win by at least by 15. FIU's just struggling to find any type of success right now. They haven't won a game since week 1.
Right.
And UNT's on a win streak. So I think UNT, the way our defense has been playing, the way our offense has been playing, the way they've been showing heart, give me the UNT mean green.
We'll see how FIU bounces back next season. I mean, I know they still have 2 games left, but next season, starting off with a clean slate, you'll have a brand new head coach and you have an interim athletic director. We'll see how FIU bounces back next season. I'm not saying they're going to lead Conference USA next year, but let's see if they can make some sort of improvement, because sometimes you just need to do some spring cleaning, and that's exactly what the Panthers are doing right now. So, well, actually, since we won't be here next week, let's do it very briefly. UNT wins today, okay? UNT wins. Let's take them by 25. They take on UTSA next week for the final game of the season. Does UNT win, Mark?
No. As much as I would want them to win, despite people thinking I'm a UTSA fan, I would want Mean Green to win, but UTSA is too good. I do think it'll be a lot closer than what people would think, though.
If UTSA loses to UAB, then I think UNT could give UTSA a really good game. But either way, I don't think UNT is winning this game, especially if UTSA beats UAB this weekend.
As I mentioned earlier, I want UTSA to blow out UAB so that we can have some remote chance. UNT is good, but I don't think they're good enough to pull off this upset at home. I would love to see it, but I don't think they're bowl eligible.
You'd love to see the stars sort of align towards the end of the year, seeing how you were just dragged through the ground at the very beginning. So it's nice to end on a happy note. But for that final game against UTSA, I'm going to say UNT does not win, but it will be less than 10 points. Yeah. UNT does similarly what they did to UTEP, and I'm not saying UTEP is better than UTSA, but they're the best shot to UTSA than what I've seen. So I think I have UTSA taking down UNT less than 10, but
28-24 kind of score.
Yeah, 28-24. I think it'll be a high-scoring game. I think both teams can really expose each other's weaknesses, especially towards the end of the season. UTSA probably looking forward to the championship game and whatnot, so they're kind of overlooking UNT. That's why I think UNT could potentially give them a more shot than what they
that's
think.
A good point you make, because if UTSA beats UAB would have 2 conference losses, while UTSA would, of course, be undefeated. So they would already have that extra room for a slip-up somewhere, so they could potentially be looking ahead of UNT to the Conference USA Championship.
Well, speaking of looking ahead, we'll leave that for next week in the home crew, but for now, UNT takes on FIU later on today, but that's going to do it for us. Guys, that's our final show for the away, but great semester, and we'll look forward to next as UNT takes on FIU later on today. But you can follow our channel on NTTV _sports on Twitter, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and all of our other social media handles. But thank you for your time this time. Until next time, God bless.